So, welcome everyone for our next get together. And we've just been kind of chewing over what we're going to share with you today that we're seeing most recently. And we've picked on the subject of wisdom. So, we'd like to start us off.
So I guess I'll say sort of I started talking this week to my husband about I didn't actually use the words of principles, but about where our experience comes from and the fact that our experience comes from the outside, from the inside out, not from the outside in. So in other words, things on the outside can't make us feel any certain way. So he was adamant with me for a little while, and we had quite a funny discussion around the fact that, you know, like if I gave him £1 million, he'd be happy. And I said, yes, but there's so much evidence that £1 million, people can have £1 million and not be happy. And do you think you could have £1 million and still get annoyed with the kids? He's like, well, yeah. So I'm like, so the £1 million can't be the thing that's making you happy because it's there all the time. So we kind of, you know, okay, kind of got that. And that was good. And there was a couple of other funny examples. But then it kind of went to, okay, well, so where does sort of, where do things come from? You know, kind of the more like sort of, okay, well, if it's not your thinking, then how do you know what to do, sort of thing, and when does it change? So I kind of said, well, there's like, you know, sort of an innate wisdom or intelligence that kind of creates everything, and if we allow ourselves to settle into it, we can sort of connect with that. And then I knew I'd lost him, and he was like, oh no, you know, whatever you talk. And I said, well, just look at the body, sort of, you know, the body, like, no, we can't replicate the body. We can't, no man could make a pair of lungs the same way that the body works, you know, or a heartbeat the same way that the body works. Obviously we've made machines and stuff, but it's not exactly the same. It's like, yeah, but you can clone people. And I was like, yeah, but there's still that initial cell that you're cloning, and that's come from somewhere. Oh no. And then I said, okay, and what about like when you react in the moment, when you don't necessarily think your way through? So for example, you know, my example I always give is kind of when something terrible happens and then you know how to respond. You wouldn't have thought your way through it and you just react. He said, yes, but it's conditioning. It's what you've, you know, over years and years of experiencing things, you've sort of figured out how you'd respond in the moment. I said, no, I don't agree with you. Anyway, so that's where we kind of left it. So explaining that piece, I found quite tricky with him. So I don't know what you guys think.
Did you share with him, which I'm sure you have in the past, but your example about when you went through something really, really difficult and you just knew this is what I have to do next?
Yeah, but he said, well, you've had, that's come from like I think he still sort of felt that I thought it, even though I wasn't necessarily thinking it. It was still coming from me and like figuring out what to do. And that potentially has come from watching other people, how they'd react. And I said, no, there's no ways I was thinking about anyone else. But, you know, and it didn't go in an argument, but I kind of just felt like he didn't. And I think this is it, isn't it? It's like, I want him to see it. I want other people to see it. I want other people to feel it. So I was like, come on, you've got to know what I'm talking about. But in the end, I just, you know, it doesn't matter. I know what I mean. And maybe through talking, you know, it'll open him up. But I suppose it goes back to that, like, resistance, like, this is what I want. You know, it feels more personal with my husband because I want him to understand it. Really.
If what he's saying is true, though, Ron, then your kids would never have displayed wisdom, and I'm sure that's not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. I suppose it depends on what we're saying wisdom is.
What are we saying wisdom is?
because we haven't really named that. I mean, we all know what we think, but we haven't named that in this meeting, have we?
Yeah.
But I remember where you were just about to say something. Maybe we should come back to it.
No, I wasn't. I was going to say, I suppose for me, what I think, like it's a feeling, it's sort of, I don't know, it's like your default, to use your word, Shazia. I don't know if you want to, go on with that. I really liked what you said there with the defaults, if you can.
So when Lucy, you asked that question, what came up was, it's not a thing, it's what there is when everything else goes away. It's like wisdom is what is left when all of our personal thinking settles, so it's not like we're trying to get anywhere. It's not like I want to strive and strain to get wisdom, because it's already what's in us, right? So it's like the place that we come back to when our mind naturally clears and thinking naturally settles. And it doesn't need to be this, like, wisdom is this big word, right? Like, you think about wisdom and you think about like wise monks or like mystics and people who just are enlightened. And I think for me, it's actually something so much simpler than that, because it is our default. It is what we come back to when we're not layering all of our thinking one after the other. And yeah, so I guess that's what it is to me. It's the lack of all of our personal thinking and just where we end up. And it's inevitable. It's like, it's not that we have to try to get rid of our thinking to get there. It's like we will inevitably come back to our place of clarity, ease, freedom, kind of knowing, that feeling of knowing, without the clutter of yes but, And
I think it's interesting, the word as well. We're talking something that, if anybody's listening who has heard of the principles, is Sydney Banks described as mind, didn't he? So it's, mind or innate intelligence or, I quite like the spark as well. It's when you give yourself a little bit of space in your head and a new thought comes through, that's a spark coming from that space that you're pointing to, coming from that decluttered default.
I think as well, like for me today, I'm thinking of it as like energy that is always moving towards thriving. So like when all our, what Shazia was just talking about, when all our personal thinking clutter settles, we come back to that base energy which always wants to push us towards thriving.
I love that, Claire. It's lovely.
It's really nice. I can actually, I'm there, I can feel it. It was so nice. You started it, Shazia, and then Claire. It was just lovely. I can really feel it. I've heard it so many times, but it really impacted me just then.
And then for me, wisdom would be what occurs to me to do or how to be from that feeling will be full of wisdom and love, because it's the feeling state that allows for something new and fresh that's not come through my cluttered, repetitive thinking. The feeling that Shazia and Claire have created that we're all feeling is because it is in us, and say we dropped into it, and then from dropping into it, I feel something fresh and unknown and different will come wherever I now put my attention from this feeling. And that's wisdom for me. Like, I didn't know what I was going to say. And then when I got that feeling and was in that feeling, then I had something to say. So that to me was wisdom in action. And it might not look like much when I was speaking, but it felt really different. It was a place where what I had to say came from, whereas before in my mind, I didn't have anything. Or if I did, it was all a bit muddled for me.
Yeah, and it's that connection, isn't it? When you do when you listen again, and when you drop, and I think I remember hearing an analogy with like it being the sea, so sort of all the individual waves think that they're individual and unique, but they're actually all part of the ocean. And when you drop down, it's still and quiet and peaceful and everything's the same, and that's what we've got in us as well. It's like we've got our personal thinking that makes us like a wave, but deep down we know we can drop into that space where it is calm and fresh.
Yeah, and our personal thinking is that kind of very choppy surface. So it feels choppy and turmoil and whatever. And then, as you say, Bron, underneath always, because that's what happened to us in the few minutes that we went from talking to having that feeling. And we went down, or for me, and I think we went down into that quieter space just immediately underneath our choppy personal thinking. We didn't have to do anything to get there. We didn't have to do a technique or a meditation or whatever. We were just there.
And I noticed in that moment all my anxiety, and I've got quite a lot to do today, just disappeared. And it was like, it's going to be fine. Which is lovely. Whatever happens, it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
I think that sea analogy as well works in another way. And this might come out a bit clumsy, but when you see the ocean, it's a whole thing. And often we try and think of ourselves as like a drop, whereas we're not. We're all part of the ocean. Like you can kind of think that you're separate for a bit, but actually you never are. And like that separateness is always in your personal thinking. But I don't know, that's a bit clumsy, but it feels like it kind of works on a few levels maybe.
I definitely had the same thought, Claire. When you gave that analogy, Bron, I just thought of what that's my head went to oneness. Because it's that we're all drops, or maybe we're waves or whatever, but we're all part of the same thing. And Sally, you were talking about kind of, we spend a lot of time up here and then we sink into this like awareness of being the ocean. And that to me is just a wonderful depiction of the oneness, and just the idea that we are separate only in form. We're different from each other only in the form of having physical bodies that are different in space and look and whatever. But actually, when you Sid talked about the thing that comes just before the form, which is the formless, the thing that comes just before our thinking, which is the formless. And that is just like, I've had glimpses of seeing that in my life, and it is just something else. Like when I have really seen and felt and known to be true the fact that everyone and everything is me, and it's the same, it's just we're all the same, and there is no separateness. Like, to me, that's it.
And like we all walk around thinking that we're individual drops, but we're not. That's just an illusion. We're the ocean, but we just think that we're a drop.
I love that you pointed to that, Shazia, because I was thinking, well, what if somebody's listening and saying, yeah, but we are different. and speaking about the form there, like I've heard formless and form before, but never really got it, but that landed a bit. And it's not to say that the form doesn't count or doesn't matter. It's just that there's something before that to look to that's so much more richer than just focusing on the form and the outside appearance. But yes, of course, we've all, that's there too. You can't ignore it. Yeah.
And that's where the juice is when we're looking towards how we're all the same, isn't it? Like, I think this is what people are pointing to when they're saying about how the principles can help, like Mara's one solution thing, for example. Like, when you're looking at how people are the same, that's where answers come from, not when we're always occupied by how people are different or how experiences are different. Or
yeah. And the connection we all had in that moment when we dropped into that feeling, I feel from that feeling we could all go and have our beautiful individual experiences and our individual lives, but know that because we've sensed that feeling that we all had, even though we're all different drops, we all had the same feeling and the same experience, and that's the connection and that's the oneness. And it was lovely just to experience that in a few moments on this call with nothing more than all looking in the same direction together.
And I think there's such a freedom in that as well, because it kind of like I can really see that the potential there for anything is genuinely there for anybody. The potential for change and for a new experience for absolutely anybody is there when you see them from that point, when you don't see them as being restricted to their form. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, because I know they're experiencing the same ocean that I'm experiencing. And then they've also got their personal thinking. But just like Lucy, when you said suddenly what you were thinking about your day, your anxieties just weren't there anymore. That's because your personal thinking, to me, that's when our personal thinking isn't there anymore. And that's when we drop into the feeling that we've all got there for all of us all the time.
And so what if someone's listening to this and thinking, that sounds great. How do I get that? What do I do? How do I get that feeling that you're talking about, Sally?
I think it would be to notice those moments when you're not caught up in your thinking. Or to have moments when you see a thought come in and you go to engage with it as you normally would and have a kind of like busy conversation with your head. And just as a different way of experiences is not to go with that train of thought and see what might come in instead and what experience you might have instead. I'm sure there are many other things, but those were the two that just occurred to me in answering your question. But I'd like to hear from other people because I'm not sure that's quite enough.
I don't know. I think like sort of just getting curious about it. Like, well, what if there's something in what I'm hearing? Like, what if that's true for me? What would that look like? Or what could that feel like? And maybe through being curious about it, might see it. I don't know. I think that's what happened to me. Because I heard people talking about this for ages before, like years before I actually, I'm only now, like, you know, in the last couple of months, probably with these conversations, really feeling it and getting what we're talking about. But initially there was something in there. I was like, okay, well, what if that's true? You know, what if I just, I'm open to it? I don't know.
I think as well, it's around so what you're pointing to, but it's around the willingness to consider the possibility that what we're feeling is not necessarily objectively true. So like what you're talking about is a curiosity, I'm calling it like a willingness to look for something more, something different, and being open to the possibility that what we're kind of experiencing is not necessarily the only thing, that there might be something more.
Yeah, and that's very true, that the words, you can't justify it with words. Words are so limited in actually, you know, we pointed to something that's got no form. So how can we describe it ever? Really?
But we can feel it.
We can feel it. Yeah.
For me, there's something about the reason I'm saying this is because it actually just happened to me in real time. We were having our conversation, and then I noticed that my son had snuck off with his iPad, and he wasn't meant to. And I could feel myself getting irritated and coming out of the feeling. And then I could hear myself, and then I was thinking, that's really annoying. I've got annoyed with him, and now it's taking me out of the feeling. And then I thought, hang on a minute. I don't need to be attached to that irritation. I can just let it go, and I'll have a conversation with him in the car because we've got to go out in 10 minutes. And then it disappeared. And I think for me, it was something to do with taking my thoughts lightly, not being really attached to them. So rather than being like, I just thought, okay, yeah, he has done something naughty, and we'll discuss it later. And the minute I had that, I dropped straight back into the feeling again. So for me, it's something about, yeah, not being so gripped by my thoughts, just going, okay. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, I get that completely.
Yeah. And also why I think that points to wisdom as well, Lucy, for me is, and I know I'm projecting now, but my guess would be the conversation in the car will be a very different kind of conversation to the conversation you would have had in real time when gripped by those thoughts.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I suppose it is just something, I suppose that does rely on knowing that your thoughts are created by you, doesn't it? That's a sort of key understanding that, you know, we can do what we want with those thoughts, and they'll come whether we like it or not, but we have a choice about how we attach to them.
Yeah, and the wisdom, maybe the wisdom is in the feeling. So actually you did have a thought, but what the wisdom is that the feeling of the thought was so horrible that's what alerted you to. Yeah,
Absolutely. I could feel it bringing me away from where I wanted to be. I was like, oh,
Yeah, I always love the idea of the feeling as our guide. When I'm in a good feeling, that tells me that there's information in that, and when I'm in a bad feeling, that's my guide. That's my indication that my state of mind is probably not in the right place to start having conversations with my son, or, you know, like that kind of, it's not in the right place to start doing stuff or making decisions or trusting my own thinking.
I'm thinking of a friend of ours often, you know, she said before, like, it's almost like we're talking about a secret garden, isn't it? Initially, you kind of think, oh, there's a secret garden there that's there for me to tap into, but I need to figure out how to unlock the gate, you know. And I think the more you kind of explore and experience it, you realize that actually there isn't a lock, you know, like the lock isn't actually there. All I need to do is open it. And then you realize that actually there's not even a gate. Like it's just an in out. You can just go really easy between the two, because you got this, you know, we're human. So like you said, you know, Lucy, your example just speaks to it beautifully. You flip in and out of it, and that's human all the time. But I think when you notice the feeling, you can go in and out with a lot less thinking, a lot less effort, a lot less trying. It's a very, it's you know, it's initially we humans, so we try to intellectualize it, you know, and it's like trying to, okay, well, how do I unpick this lock? It's not actually there.
Yeah.
And that just makes it a bit more playful, doesn't it? Like, okay, well, it's there. Let's just see what works and what doesn't, and it might be different every time. Sorry, Sally.
No. And the big change for me in what we're talking about and the feeling is to know, like Shazia says, it's saying, and you saying about, it's telling us about our state of mind and where our thinking is. It's not telling us about what's happening in the outside world. That's a neutral. What we're learning about through the feeling is our state of mind and how clear it is, and how helpful that our thinking is in that moment. And that's the inside out understanding. If people have heard that term, then inside out is to know that what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, is the feeling of our thinking in the moment.
Yeah. Anybody got anything else?
The only thing that's coming to mind is also that like wisdom isn't kind of a place in the sense that it's not like we're connecting to it, we are it. Like anyone who's conscious, anything that's conscious is wisdom in form, which I'm maybe going off down a bit more of a philosophical tack again, but it again, it's kind of like, it's not, as we've been saying, it's not a place to get to, it's already there because we're it. It's all like we're already sitting in it, we just don't always realize.
Yeah, we wouldn't be alive without it.
So I'm just going to speak for the people that have kind of been on this call all the way through to this point and have not felt the feeling, have not felt connected, have been, I guess, hanging out in that separate space. And I don't know, maybe most of them will have turned off anyway because they just didn't feel in alignment. But I guess all I wanted to do was just kind of share real time what I see now, because I've kind of, I'm feeling more connected, but only in the last few moments in a way. And that, when I look back and think, why have I spent almost this entire call not feeling it? It's that thought that was, in a sense, stopping me from feeling it. So It's like I really wanted to. I saw you guys there, and I'm thinking, where's it gone? Why can't I get it? That all sounds like a load of crap they're talking. Oh, this doesn't work anyway. This is stupid. Oh, why don't you just hang up? Oh no, they'll think terribly of me. And at some point, somehow that just kind of fell away. And it wasn't anything I thought myself into. And maybe, yeah, it wasn't anything I did. And that kind of, I suppose I'm just saying that for the people that didn't feel that they were in alignment with you guys this morning, because we all have times like that when we don't feel it and we really want to feel it, or we kind of want to believe at least. And yeah, so that was what I wanted to share.
Frank, what happened for you when that did all fall away?
I guess what happened was I just went much quieter inside. There was, yeah, I just went quiet. Stopped shaking the snow globe. And it settled when I stopped trying to change it. So, I guess we have our this week's podcast. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. And for those of you that joined us, well done for making it to the end. And hopefully we'll see you all again soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.